Hello, and welcome back to the Audible Finish, where we discuss the week gone by in the world of wrestling. I'm your host, Dimitri Kalos, and alongside me, as always, is my esteemed co-host, Thanasio. Welcome back, Thanasio.
Thank you for having me. I am so stoked after a fantabulous WrestleMania weekend.
Well, you've already leaned into it. In today's episode, we are going to discuss our full review of WrestleMania 40 this weekend, including our thoughts on Cody Rhodes finally finishing the story. We'll also recap the Raw After Mania, which has seemingly teased a continuation of The Rock and Cody Rhodes' rivalry. Will the People's Champ actually face the American Nightmare for the WWE Championship? We'll discuss that and more later on. We'll then close this week's episodes with our discussion of AEW choosing to broadcast the official footage of the CM Punk Jack Perry altercation at All In Wembley last year, discussing whether we think it was the right move to show it. If you are enjoying the podcast and have a moment, please like, share, and subscribe. And if there is a certain topic that interests you more than the other, please feel free to jump ahead to it using the timestamps in the description below. On that note, Thanasi, we've dillied and dallied around it, but it's time to get completely in the thick of things with our WrestleMania 40 thoughts. Now, obviously, this was a loaded card with plenty of matches, so we're not going to be discussing every match in depth. And on that point, we are going to discuss at first our thoughts on the main events, starting with the night one tag team match between The Rock and Roman Reigns versus Seth Rollins and Cody Rhodes. There were plenty of moments in here. It was a very long match at 44 minutes, roughly. And it saw the Bloodline actually emerge victorious. Thanasi, what were your thoughts from this match?
Where I'm going to begin is on duration, and purely because you've raised it. And I think the question that I posed to you, because we were watching this together, was in essence, it was, did it need to be this long? But the way that I phrased it was, would it have been worse if it were shorter? And I think we both concluded that at 45 minutes, with a quite slow pace, mind you, we could have brought it down to easily 35, easily, potentially to 30, in my opinion, and still have had an equally impressive showing out there. As far as the booking call, in order to create as many roadblocks as possible for Cody the following night, it was the correct decision. We, of course, predicted it. The both of us had predicted that correctly. But overall, it did feel like a spectacle, if we can put it that way, right? Almost like really a sort of callback to WrestleMania 1 in many ways. Although the celebrity in this case was a heel instead of a babyface. I did see some parallels there. I don't know about you.
I wouldn't say that I noticed that sort of parallel, but what I did like about this match is one of the concerns I had is that with three of these wrestlers having to wrestle twice, I was worried about any one of them coming out of this weekend looking particularly weak. And I'm glad to say that if the way they planned everything, no one wrestler came out of this looking bad. And I think that The Rock getting the win is good for the long-term story. It looks like they're building towards next, which is that The Rock is probably going to claim that he beat Cody Rhodes at WrestleMania, where his cousin, the Roman Reigns, failed. And I reckon that's going to be something that he does tease. Obviously, in this match, we even saw a hint, the slightest hint of dissension in the ranks when Roman accidentally speared The Rock. Obviously, that is something that they've not um, shown as a problem as of yet, but that could be something they show down the line. But that led into the night two match, and this was half a match and the other half just, in my opinion, a celebration of the Bloodline story and 40 years of WrestleMania. We had plenty of people show up. Jay and Jimmy got into it, rekindling their beef from the night earlier. Solo Sikoa came out, tried to give Roman the assist, didn't work. Cena takes out Solo, and then The Rock confronts Cena again, harkening back to more than a decade prior now when those two had their little matches at WrestleMania. And then on top of that, Seth Rollins in Shield getup coming out, The Undertaker coming out to eliminate The Rock from contention. Like, to me, this was a match that it was, in my opinion, it was exactly what it needed to be because last year we already had a very good match between these two. This year it felt more like a let's go out there and officially crown the next guy and give Cody that rub of beating Roman Reigns. I have other thoughts on this, but honestly, like there's so much to get into. What were your thoughts on this night two main event?
My biggest serious takeaway is on the ring psychology that was taking place. And if I can take you back to WrestleMania 24, the big story of that match was that Edge had a reversal for all of the Undertaker's signature moves. In this particular match, we had that sort of strong Cody, right? He had reversals. He was able to take control of the match. Even when they went out into the crowd, he reversed the suplex attempt 3 times and then delivered his own on that fixture there, whatever it was. So Cody actually was looking very, very strong. He didn't need that help, that FU from Cena to get the victory because it was quite clear that he was already keeping up with Roman. He'd done his homework, done his research. I agree with your assessment, and I would call it overbooking euphoria, right? Having the Undertaker in there, having the Shield, having um, John Cena come out, as well as all members of the Bloodline, Jey Uso as well. It was what it needed to be, and it needed to be a massive, massive blow off in homage to the 40-year history of WrestleMania. If I can just make one small observation, right? Cena cops a rock bottom and then is out jumping up and down after the match, post match, like a schoolboy. Seth Rollins cops a spear and a smack to the back from Roman. He sells it. He sells it up until the moment he gets to the back. That is the dedication that we have from Seth Rollins. And I'm stoked that he got his first ever main event, as I am stoked with Cody for finally finishing the story and being the new franchise player for the WWE.
To defend Cena just a little bit, Seth Rollins had wrestled twice in the span of 2 days and then copped those offense, whereas Cena only copped a single rock bottom. So I can understand that maybe that didn't keep him down and out for the post match jubilation of Cody Rhodes. Which, by the way, we're talking about harkening back to prior Mania moments. That was a very much a WrestleMania 10 worthy finish with the locker room lifting Cody up, almost acknowledging him as their next champ.
Not only that, right? Because usually when it comes to these moments of the locker room celebrating with someone, they send out the mid carders and the undercarders, right? The indispensable people, the dispensable talent. Who did they send out this time? They sent out main event Jey Uso. That makes sense in the story. But also you've got people like Kevin Owens, the new Intercontinental Champion, Sami Zayn, LA Knight, Randy Orton, CM Punk. It's main event level superstars to say, you know what, this is it, right? This is our guy. And also these are the baby faces that are seen to be, even in storyline, to be the ones that are really, really backing this guy. And what is interesting, Roman Reigns has speared, pinned, defeated every single one of them. And I saw a reel actually on, I think it was on YouTube actually after the fact, where it was just putting into context. It was fan footage of all these guys running past Roman down the ramp to celebrate with Cody and not even giving him a second of thought, right? Where it's like in an instant, he goes from this revered God level superstar to this forgettable, you don't even matter anymore. And it's put into context by it's the guys that he defeated, right? The ones that really, really tried to knock him off. They couldn't manage it. And now it's all about this new franchise player.
I just want to mention a couple other spots that I really liked. I really liked Roman hitting Seth with the chair. This is something 10 years in the making, finally gets his revenge, but it costs him. And a lot of people were mentioning that this is Seth Rollins being Cody's literal shield. It's a very nice, very thematic. And there was another moment I noticed, which is Roman was smiling during the final pinfall. And there's one interpretation of this that I'm not saying is true, but based on Paul Heyman describing Roman Reigns' character as someone that he's almost begging someone to even be good enough to beat him. I felt like in that moment, there's an interpretation to have is that he almost knows that he's beaten. And there's a small part of him that's glad to sort of put on the burden on someone else to actually lead the company. That's just one interpretation, very much an artistic, and it's not really based in any complete reality or confirmation. But I just thought there's something almost. The other thing as well is it could just be Roman was just having a good moment, just having a laugh. I just he couldn't hold it back in. But I just thought that was amusing to me. Obviously, WrestleMania is not just the main events, and I just want to quickly mention some of the other highlights. Sami Zayn beating Gunter, ending the 666-day reign. I mean, I don't think you could have timed that any better.
He even on Raw, he made a comment. I couldn't actually make out what it was because the audio wasn't loud enough on my computer. But he said something Allah when he said 666 days to express his sheer shock for the amount of time that Gunther held it.
That was a great match as well. I really enjoyed that. That was probably my favorite match of night one. And then another big moment, crowning a new champion. Bailey beats Io. That was really pleasing. And I think that was actually, in my opinion, that was better than the Becky Rhea match. Not that we'd need to be comparing to show that they were good, but I just thought that was a really solid match in itself. And how can we forget? We're talking about the WWE Universal Championship. The World Heavyweight Championship went through a hell of a lot in the opening parts of night two. Obviously, Drew wins against Seth Rollins, and that match felt a bit like a spot heavy match, which I assume was because Seth didn't have the energy in him to actually put on the normal bout that he can pull off. And then Drew gets so caught up in celebrating and in his obsession with Punk that Damian Priest manages to cash in, and it was said on the press conference afterwards that he's the first Puerto Rican champion since Pedro Morales from like 50 years ago. So honestly, the World Heavyweight Championship that is completely that whole scene has completely undergone a complete shift. What do you think of all this that's been happening?
I was a big fan of the way that they approached it because I think whether it's a kayfabe decision or it's a sporting decision, an athletic decision, having Seth's match be a lot more spot heavy, it did make a lot of sense, right? Even though I know that Rollins and McIntyre, they can do like that fast-paced, heavy style with all the moves, with the ring psychology.
Which we've
This
seen.
one, which we have seen in the past, that's right. This one did make sense, right? And it was a very story-heavy match as well. I mean, Drew McIntyre pauses during the match after he's laid down the heavyweight champion of the world, so he can tweet "LOL, I'm bored at work" right there with after he took his phone from his wife. Um, I'm stoked that Drew got his moment in front of the crowd. I think it would have been fabulous for him to at least leave WrestleMania as the champion, but the story made sense for him. You know, we're always progressing, like always got to be thinking about the future. The fact that he went and gloated against CM Punk, that was his own downfall. That was his fault. It wouldn't have happened otherwise. And it even just sets things up really well for Drew to get his real anointment coming into Clash at the Castle in Scotland,
If
right?
he does get it there. He may not.
Surely, no, it must happen. It must happen.
I don't know. Look, I thought it was great. I think thematically it just made a lot of sense what they were going for. So I thought it was good, and I'm really happy for Damian Priest. I think this guy's definitely earned that right to call himself a world champion and represent the Raw brand moving forward.
Yeah.
Is there any other thoughts you wanted to raise about WrestleMania?
Can I just say because you brought it up earlier about the Sami Zayn versus Gunter match, right? Sami Zayn's wife, we've heard it before, but she really gets wrestling, right? She doesn't just sit there on the sidelines, just clapping along, doesn't really, adopt a character or anything. She was really invested and she added a lot to the match, to the psychology of the match, right? She helped build that up, that anticipation, so that when we saw that magnificent brainbuster onto the top turnbuckle that Sami Zayn slash El Generico pulled off, it was like really like the crowd was hot for it. Like we were ready to see the end of the Gunter reign as of that move. And it was greatly thanks to her. That being said, was it the right time to end the Gunter reign? We could have gone longer. I think everyone would have been comfortable with it continuing past WrestleMania. but Sami Zayn has as much credibility as a wrestler, as a performer, as Gunther. So this is someone credible to take on the helm. And then that being said, we can very soon, hopefully, see Gunther transitioning into that main event proper for him, right? Challenging for the world title, maybe winning King of the Ring in Saudi Arabia potentially. But I'm really, really satisfied with the WrestleMania that we got.
On that point, where it's very recent, but where does this Mania sit with you? Because for me, I think this is definitely a top five Mania in history.
I'll put it this way, right? I don't like to sort of express my personal ranking, but I'll qualitatively put it this way. Since I stopped watching wrestling for a period around 2013 after WrestleMania 29, I was not watching for WrestleMania 30, wasn't watching for 31, and I got back into it around 2016, WrestleMania 32, my HSC year. Every WrestleMania that I've watched since WrestleMania 32, I have not gone back and watched it again, right? Because I believe that, and maybe it's just me, I don't think that they have rewatchability in the same way that the 17s, the 19s, the 21, 22s, or 24s, a great deal have that rewatchability. This is the first one in, I would say, 10 years that it is genuinely a rewatchable one and one that I am keen to rewatch. Yes, there's recency bias, but you felt something and you knew that this one was like a really, really special one watching it in a way that I think the previous 10 or so have not quite captured. So that's the way I would express it, right? I'm not going to give it a ranking, but I'm going to say that it's up there. I dare say is one of the all-time greats.
Yeah, well, I completely agree with that last statement. I think it is definitely going to be one that's remembered for years to come. All right, well, we've spoken at length about our Mania thoughts. We might as well move on to the next part, which is the Raw After Mania. And this opened with, I'll be honest, an insanely long segment with basically Cody Rhodes being the champ, celebrating that, and then The Rock coming out. And it was a very interesting interaction. Look, they took their time, but the crux of it was basically in this quote, I believe, from The Rock, or maybe I'm paraphrasing his sentiment, which is that your story with Roman has finished, our story has just begun. And it's seemingly already teased that there will be a confrontation between The Rock and Cody Rhodes again in the future. It's up to us as fans to speculate when that might be, whether it's a SummerSlam, whether it's a Royal Rumble, whether it's WrestleMania 41. But how do you feel about the prospect of The Rock versus Cody Rhodes and potentially that being for the WWE Championship?
There's a lot of dimensions here, and I'm curious to get your views on it as well. But to the extent that it's for the title, I'm not interested, right? I don't want to, like The Rock, I don't see him as a credible contender for the world title. I don't want him to be world champion. So I would be against any sort of world title match between the two. Likewise, I would not be in favor of a confrontation in the main event of WrestleMania for the same reason of, like of The Rock having come back in the past, that it takes away from the current stars, right? These are all views in principle. Now, there is the added bonus that after seeing this story of the last few months, we badly want to see a Cody versus The Rock confrontation, right, in singles, because that's been a great deal of the focus in this what is now the end of the Bloodline saga. So I would actually be in favor of it being a SummerSlam match. I think that would be a lot more conducive to a massive SummerSlam, like the mania of the American summer. As far as it being for the world title, I would tolerate that. But I think we've got to be setting it up probably better for The Rock to go against Roman at WrestleMania 41, and then Cody actually having, going head to head against the biggest heel of the day at WrestleMania 41 if he's still the champion around then. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I think I I'll put it like this. I really now want to see Cody Rhodes versus The Rock. And it's not because of the Raw segment. It's because of the last 2 months. They've really built that as the actual final story within this overarching bloodline versus Cody saga. They've built that as like the final moment. And technically, as the final boss, Cody Rhodes didn't overcome the final boss. So it feels like there is something there to revisit. And I would like to see it. I'm not against it being for the title. I just don't want to see it change. It's the same way that when John Cena versed Roman Reigns back in SummerSlam, no, SummerSlam 2021, I was okay with the match as long as John Cena didn't actually beat Roman Reigns. And the problem there is that you end up watching the match and you're not thinking to yourself, I'm just enjoying this. You're thinking to yourself in the back of your head, oh, what if? And that's not a great place to be in wrestling when you're always obsessed when you're obsessing at the thought of the bad booking decision coming.
Can I add this point that as far as the match occurring at a WrestleMania, I think that if they did book it that way, it would represent a passing of the torch match. And I
Sure.
would personally have an issue with that because The Rock hasn't had the torch in a long time. He already passed the torch to Cena at WrestleMania 29, right? That was the passing of the torch match that happened. So it's for Cena now to have a passing of the torch match, which he did in 2017 to Roman. When they were planning the Roman versus Rock match for WrestleMania 40, like for this past WrestleMania, a lot of the vibe would have been like the feel of it would have been a passing of the torch, even though it's got that bloodline, family warfare aspect to it. So, and where I'm going with this is don't give us a passing of the torch match next year because that's what this was. This was in the best way possible. Roman handing over not to his number two, but to his 1A, right? His actual storyline nemesis, the guy who actually defeated him properly. That's what this was. It was the passing of the torch in the right way. So that's my, I guess, opposition to a WrestleMania 41 Cody versus Rock match.
The problem there, you are completely right. The problem there is whoever The Rock faces, if he's going to do that respect thing at the end, that basically associates it with passing of the torch. Doesn't matter who he wrestles, whether it's Roman Reigns versus whether it's Cody Rhodes, whether it's a Solo Sikoa, whoever it is. If he ends the match going, "Oh, fair play, you won," or if he ends the match spending 5 minutes in the ring to say thank you to everyone, that is him basically saying, "Oh, that person who beat me is the next guy or whatever." So in that sense, doesn't matter who he faces. In principle, that's kind of how they're going to handle it. And I'm with you. I don't need to see that with Cody Rhodes. I don't need to see that with Roman Reigns. They've both been made in my eyes. They don't need that. So they could do with having that with someone else. Honestly, I'd be more invested in The Rock versus someone completely fresh and building them up.
And I would say not in the main event of WrestleMania because I think that a better positioning, like idea here, right? If you actually want to pass the torch to Cody in a brand new, fresh way, have have him go over CM Punk at WrestleMania 41, right? Night two. Have Punk be the one to pass the torch to him, and then have night one be main evented, not even with The Rock. Have Roman go up against Seth Rollins, right? The match we wanted to see at WrestleMania for a hell of a long time. I would be much more interested in that personally. And then
I
give us Cody versus Rock at SummerSlam, right? Like I'm not saying don't give it to us at all, but position things out in the with the appropriate timing. That's my view.
I think that just fantasy planning here, not booking, because I'm happy to see whatever happens. But I think that there is the potential that next Mania could be a Cody versus Gunter situation at Mania. And
Which would be the best thing.
it would be great. But I think the good thing about all of this is that it's for the first time in a long time, it feels like WWE has possibilities and more than the one. Feels like there are plenty of great avenues you can go down, and that they're not restricted to, oh, we don't have anyone, or we don't have those options available. It's like, no, right now, feels like they have plenty of options. And I think part of the reason for that is because in the wings, when while Roman was champion, were plenty of developing stars that were getting to that peak, getting to that place where they are ready. You look at a guy like Sami Zayn, he's ready. You look at a guy like main event Jey Uso, he's ready for that next step. Cody Rhodes was obviously ready for that next step. Then you're bringing in guys like CM Punk into the fold. Drew McIntyre and Seth Rollins are in career best form. Like you have all these great stars, and then LA Knight. Like you can go on. Randy Orton even could get another reign, and I don't think anyone would be complaining. And this is way better than a couple years ago when it didn't feel like there was this excitement and this preparedness for other people to actually step up. So
I completely agree with everything you said. I'm not adding anything on because I'm drinking it in, man.
well, we go from one company that seemingly has lots of good things in its future.
Before we go into it, can I just ask you one thing, right? Because I know we're going into this. What did you think of the Raw after WrestleMania crowd?
I thought they were good.
They were good. This is my observation, though. You know how usually it's like a hostile takeover where they say, oh, they cheer the guys that they usually boo, and they
Yeah,
boo
yeah.
the guys they usually cheer. Well, essentially, right, the way that phrasing there is WWE catchwords, buzzwords, but they did not hostily take over the show. And my opinion is the reason that they did that is because we just all love the booking decisions that have been taking place. There's no reason for the crowd to do a hostile takeover. All we're there is to actually enjoy the wrestling for once, which we haven't been able to do for a heck of a long time.
Yeah.
So that I just wanted to point that out before we go into Dynamite. Over to you for the Southern promotion.
Before I was interrupted, I was going to intro about the fact that we have one company that is on an absolute high, and we compare that to another company that has used the name of CM Punk to get one last rating spike with AEW Dynamite this week. So they teased ahead of time that they were going to show the All In footage of the backstage altercation between CM Punk and Jack Perry. This was obviously from All In London last year in late August, I believe.
August.
And I want to briefly add some context. So this was something that was being reported WrestleMania weekend, lots of attention trying to get their names into the headlines, which is fair enough. Nothing wrong with that. And interestingly, Tony Khan spoke to Sports Illustrated and was basically asked why they're showing it now. What's the motivation? And he said, and I'm quoting here, the decision is based on putting on the best show for AEW, as well as driving interest for Dynamite and our Dynasty pay-per-view on April 21. This is real-life footage that affected many people, and it will air for the first time on TBS during Dynamite. Now, the reason I'm bringing that up is you, people asking why it's happening now. I feel like Tony Khan has sort of put it right there, which is we're showing it now because it feeds into the story we're trying to tell. In other words, we're using it to get promotion on and get eyes on the current storylines we're telling, which in the case was proven to be the FTR Young Bucks match that is coming up at Dynasty. The footage itself, we're going to get into. I want to quickly add the context that I feel like the motivation on the part of the Young Bucks was to, one, reintroduce Jack Perry into the AEW fan base, let them know that he could be coming back imminently, and two, was to try and get a dig at FTR, who are friends with Punk. And I feel that in storyline, FTR did not react emotionally enough to the slander or the challenge against CM Punk's character to make it feel like this was worthwhile in showing on that front. But that's just my thoughts. In general, Thanasi, there's been plenty that's been reported on this incident ever since it happened. And CM Punk brought light to his side of the story on the Ariel Helwani show, with the interview he did with Ariel Helwani a week or two ago. Did the footage shown match, in your opinion, CM Punk's description? In other words, did he convey honestly and correctly the situation, or do you think that there is he misinterpreted, or he perhaps said some details that weren't correct? How did you feel about it?
So in America, they have this concept in the courts of the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. CM Punk did tell the truth. He told nothing but the truth, but he didn't tell the whole truth. And what I mean by that is a lot of the reports last August, they made references to, or actually, he went out on TV himself. Tony Khan said that he feared for his life. CM Punk didn't comment on any physicality with Tony Khan, or indeed any interaction in heat with Tony Khan on the MMA Hour with Ariel Helwani. He did allude to the fact that I didn't punch anybody, but I did choke somebody
A little bit,
a little bit, yes. Well,
as he said.
in the footage, it did look like he was putting Jack Perry in that sort of chokehold, that guillotine style chokehold, not a push. CM Punk did throw the first push. He made the first push. That was quite evident. Props to Samoa Joe, because there were a lot of other stuff that kind of moved away from the violence, understandably, right? You see danger, you have to put yourself out of it. But Samoa Joe did go in immediately to intervene, right? Shows you why he's an appropriate leader and world champion these days. Hook just kind of stood frozen in the spot. But my analysis on this specific part, on the question that you've raised very specifically, is that CM Punk did tell the truth, but perhaps left out certain bits and pieces pertaining specifically to the in hot blood against Tony Khan. What do you reckon?
I think that the footage doesn't make him look good, but like I sort of thought to myself before when they announced it, I didn't think, and I still don't think this has changed anyone's opinion on either end. I think the people that didn't like Punk and disagreed with what he did will still have that view. And I think the people that think that Punk was in a company and that they felt like he had been slighted on many times by some of his co-workers, I think will still feel that way. There's no denying he was the physical aggressor. Whatever Jack Perry did, he did not physically challenge or threaten Punk in any way. Punk did. So there's not much to defend there. I feel the Tony Khan comment is the thing that's the most damning, because he claimed he feared for his life. And to me, the only part of the footage that would in any case suggest his life was in danger was when Punk put him in the guillotine choke, and he sort of didn't even knock over a monitor, but sort of nearly knocked over a monitor that where Tony Khan was sat. And I can only imagine that that is the part he's talking about, is that the threat of if those heavy equipment had fallen on him, maybe it could have led to a dangerous situation.
I've got two comments on that point. One is, before having seen this footage, before having gone back and to look at this footage, I would say that it's sort of like the situation of there is danger around you, and you start to wonder, am I also going to be in danger soon? Right? It doesn't mean necessarily I'm being punched right now, but there's a lot of punching happening. Am I next? Right? I will also, and I deliberately waited until the show began to do this way, because you and I have got like a shared screen going on at the moment. So allow me to share this with you. Can you see on the screen what I'm sharing? And then I'll narrate for our viewers.
It's okay, thanks. I've seen the footage, so whatever you want to say your thoughts.
All right, well, look right here, right? CM Punk actually, after having been involved with Jack Perry after the punch, and he gets pulled aside, he starts to what I can only describe as lunge off screen, right? So I'm showing you the footage here. It's in the chokehold. He backs in, knocks over the monitor, and then as he gets pulled back, he goes off screen, and he's got two people pulling him back into frame, and then we slowly move back. What I can only describe this as is this much must be what they were talking about when they were talking about CM Punk lunges at Tony Khan, if you recall that headline. And that is, after having looked at it a second time, and I think it's pretty safe for us to assume Tony Khan is seated off frame behind that wall with the All In poster on it. that CM Punk is quite clearly very aggressively heading behind that wall where the camera can't see anything, but Tony Khan must be seated there and he needs to be pulled back by two people back into frame.
In that, so I can actually say that when the monitor nearly fell over, you do see a suited up man sort of adjust the monitor, and in that glimpse, you do get a couple frames where it does look very much like Tony Khan. So there's
Mhm.
definitely he definitely was there. Like, there's no doubt in my mind that that's where he was positioned throughout the whole thing. The part where he lunges at Tony Khan, to me, that is the indication of a very angry, sort of like pointing rant or like yelling, screaming type motion that people sometimes do when they get incredibly heated at someone. And I can imagine for Tony Khan, he probably wasn't happy to see someone he thought was, a friend of his at work, sort of being so nasty, being so loud and so aggressive towards him. And you are right, he did have to get restrained by two people sort of keeping him in check. I think the whole situation makes for, in my opinion, I think it says a lot about the company that that fight happened literally in front of Tony Khan.
Mm.
And I hope that moving forward, Tony Khan sort of is a bit more uh what's the right word? Not aggressive, but a bit more staunch in the way he sort of runs things with the company. Because it doesn't matter who it is, even if it's CM Punk, none of your employees should be acting that way in front of you and thinking that that's fair game and that there's no repercussions.
Well, if I can just say it this, like, and this is coming from the massive CM Punk fan, right? Everyone, everyone should have the right to feel safe at work. Doesn't matter whether you're the owner or whether you're at, the bottom of the totem pole, right? Whether you're maintenance staff, reception staff, people that are still climbing their way up, junior, entry level staff, everyone should have the right to feel safe at work. I think leaving the quote aside about I feared for my life, it was quite clear and it's quite reasonable for Tony Khan to come out and say, I feared for my safety when someone is lunging at you like that. That part's a reasonable claim. And I think a little bit by focusing too much on the I feared for my life, we're taking, or some people are kind of like shifting the focus to something where it's like, well, the problem is actually quite evident there. Jack Perry should have felt safe at work. He didn't.
The reason people bring it up is because if you look back at that Tony Khan announcement, that wasn't just something he said in the spur of the moment. That was a calculated line. That whole speech he gives right after the incident, explaining why CM Punk has been fired. That isn't just something that he said as an on the cuff promo. That was verbiage that has been probably approved and probably said to him, you should say this. And I think that's why people sort of
That's
are
conjecture.
target.
I don't know if I agree with that particular assessment.
Okay, you can say that, but I'm telling you right now that with Tony Khan, that was a pre-approved statement that probably wasn't even his uh syntax. It was probably something that was told to him, you should say this for whatever reasons. And that's why people are picking him up on it, because those are his words being put out there. And look, Tony Khan is not he's not a saint, and obviously, like, you can fall victim to sometimes your own words being coming back to bite you in the ass. Like, this happened with him recently with about how he said he'd never release talent, and now he is. I think, look, sometimes things change. Sometimes you get caught in the heat of the moment, and sometimes you have to respond to situations. And I think with Tony Khan, he was being held accountable for the way in which he phrased it. But in the end of the day, at the end of the day, him getting rid of CM Punk was probably the best thing for AEW. It was probably the best thing for CM Punk. And it's probably the best thing for the wrestling business in itself. Because when something is as toxic as what it was, you need to remove the elements that are making it as combustible as what it was.
So, question for you. By airing what is probably the most toxic thing they can possibly air on live television, he gave a kayfabe answer. He gave a kayfabe answer, but outside of kayfabe, was the reason for this, for airing this on live television, to A, demonize CM Punk, and B, absolve Jack Perry?
I think more so A. I think with Jack Perry that I mean, to be honest, for me, Jack Perry's a hero. because he got CM Punk out of a situation that he didn't want to be in any longer, and he's gone to WWE, and now we're seeing other work being produced out of him. So for me, Jack Perry, I don't have any ill will towards him. I think he's a guy that obviously sounds like he probably needs a bit of a to be checked in a little bit with certain attitudes. That's what people are saying, has a bit of an attitude when it comes to wrestling, but I'm sure that with time and maturity that can improve. I think definitely this felt like to me as an extension of the Tony Khan issue with the CM Punk interview. It felt like Tony Khan really did take it badly, that CM Punk just aired out all the dirty laundry and spoke his mind completely on the whole situation. And I think there was a part of Tony Khan that felt that AEW was being put into the mud through that interview. So he just wanted to defend the company. And I understand that. I still feel that if AEW did not respond in any way, no one would have considered that as like a damning assessment of AEW, because I think people realized the moment CM Punk left, and even when he was in the company calling out shots and calling out things that had happened, I think the fans and the people that already had a side, I do not think were ever going to change their opinion because of the CM Punk interview with Ariel Helwani, nor the footage that was shown today. I think people knew that, and the fact that the footage seemed to very closely resemble what had already been put out there in the media and from CM Punk himself says that in most cases the actual reporting of the incident is accurate. And fans already knew that, they'd already consumed that information, so they already knew how they felt about it. Do you think this was we know it wasn't a necessary move, but do we think that in the context of kayfabe or in the context of just putting it out there, this was the right move for AEW?
Um, Look, I think the Nielsen ratings are actually going to be the biggest indicator of this, right? Like if indeed there was a rating spike for it, then it was the right call because controversy creates cash. Um, it's risky though because it does look as if like you have this dirty laundry that is the company's dirty laundry. It's not Phil Brooks's dirty laundry, right? It's AEW's because it happened on their watch and in their premises. So if you're airing it, there is the risk that it's making your company look bad. Um, I think in general, like to a neutral viewer, you can make the argument of, well, this guy was here, he was toxic, we got rid of it, and this is what we do, right? So it makes them look better. But it's a fine line, right? So overall, right call. In I'd have to say yes, because I'm a consumer. I wanted to see it. They gave me what I wanted. So with that very basic rudimentary logic, the answer's got to be yes. I don't know. What do you reckon?
I'm glad to have seen it because now it puts everything to bed as a fan. I'll be honest, there was nothing inside of me that would have felt devastated if I never saw this footage because I felt like I already kind of knew what the situation was with the way everyone was talking about it anyway. I'd actually be more curious to see the all-out brawl, but that's another story.
I don't think they've got CCTV footage of that though, because that happened in the locker rooms, not in Gorilla or in Dusty as AW call it.
Well,
Um,
I'd even be content with someone talking about it, but the point is, they don't need to revisit that, and they probably shouldn't either. I would say this as well, on your point about the right move, that a little part of it is also based on how the ratings go. I think it would be almost better for the company if the ratings did not spike, because then they can say to the locker room, CM Punk, the biggest name we had here, did not change a single thing for us, which proves that what we're doing no longer needs him because he's not going to add anything further, so we can build on what we've already got. If there is a rating spike, they can say, look, we used his name one last time to get more eyes on us. Now let's try and use that to do something great. So I think that whatever the case, the company should see the positive in the situation because they've already aired it now. They can't just say it was a bad move. They've done it. So now they need to look at what are the positives they can create out of it. And hopefully one of those positives is a great tag team match between FTR and the Young Bucks. And hopefully one day bringing Jack Perry into the fold to make something good out of his career so that's not wasted. and that the last thing that we think about him is not the CM Punk choked him out.
I genuinely think that Jack Perry is going to be returning to AEW and he's going to be joining this new elite, the one with the Young Bucks and Kazuchika Okada. He's going to be that fourth member, basically, with the ousted Omega and Hangman. I think that I can see where that's going. Whether or not that's going to be a fantastic storyline, time will tell. But I do think that that's the next step. I think that would make sense.
Well, there's plenty to speculate on that end, and we've got a week left of TV build before we get into Dynasty in on April 21, which is going to be it's looking like it's going to be a very interesting show with all these things going on. Uh, I'm very excited for it. Honestly, this brings us to the end of this week's edition of the Audible Finish. But next week we will be reviewing the continuing fallout from WrestleMania, chiefly from the SmackDown side of things. But we'll also be giving our thoughts ahead of AEW Dynasty, which, as we said a couple moments ago, it's looking like it's going to be a very interesting show. Which, given that it was placed only a couple weeks after Mania, they've done a good job of keeping the interest there, I would say. Honestly, it's great to have your company as always.
Good to be here and excited to pivot to AEW focus for next week.
And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Until next time, we hope everything you do is just too sweet.